2024 was the fearless year of Shadow, and in review, this could potentially be one of the best years that Sonic has ever had. With two of the biggest releases this year with Sonic Movie 3 and Sonic X Shadow Generations, Shadow was a huge part of both of those pieces of media. And overall, doing an entire year focused on a character that isn't Sonic was a huge risk to take for Sega, considering a similar company like Nintendo did this with their beloved Luigi, and it failed miserably. But the question that arises when you kind of think about how well the fearless year of Shadow actually did is, would they do it again for another character? The Sonic series is obviously filled with an abundance of characters, and there's a lot of characters to pick from and a lot of beloved characters that I think could potentially have an entire year dedicated to them. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, is I'm going to list my top 5 characters on who I think are most deserving of an entire year dedicated to them, but also who just genuinely makes sense to have an entire year dedicated to them. I think the biggest reason on why Shadow works so well is just how popular of a character Shadow is he has just as much popularity as Sonic. I think if you ask any random person off the street to name him a Sonic character, I think the two that they're going to name is Sonic and Shadow. They might know the likes of Tails or Knuckles or maybe even Amy or Dr. Eggman, but Sonic and Shadow's popularity is just absolutely insane, especially with the recent success of Sonic Movie 3, putting a lot more new eyes on Shadow. A few honorable mentions that I'd like to list right off the bat is going to be Blaze the Cat. Blaze is a character that obviously is very similar to Sonic but just lives in another dimension, and also is a princess, and also the guardian of the Soul Emeralds. She has a bunch of backstory that has yet to be explored, and genuinely is just one of the coolest characters, with having some insane fire abilities and also having the likes of her transformation in Burning Blaze. Blaze is a really cool character, and I think she definitely deserves to be featured in a mainline game again, or potentially just be a playable character again. I think it would just be a little bit too risky on Sega's end to go ahead and do a whole year dedicated to Blaze the Cat. Because if you haven't played Sonic Rush or even Sonic 06, you probably really don't even know who Blaze is, as she's featured so little and mentioned so little as well. My next honorary mention is going to be the Chaotix. I'm going to kind of group these three together as they're always kind of around one another and people just kind of collectively know them as a group, but the likes of Vector the Crocodile, Charmy the Bee, and Espio the Chameleon. Three amazing characters. While Charmy does annoy me at times, I still love all of them. I think it would be really cool to have them in a game. I don't know if you could entirely make a full-on game with just the Chaotix, but I think doing some detective work with more of like kind of the hero style could end up working really well if it was put in more depth and just given a lot more time to work on just a game for them. Or even seeing Knuckles team up with them again and kind of create a new Knuckles Chaotix. All three of them get really rare screen time, and I genuinely wish that they got more screen time, as I think Espio and Vector are some of the coolest characters in the entire series. And Espio's abilities go absolutely insane, with having ninja-like abilities and being able to turn invisible whenever he wants. Like, how could you not think that dude is cool? And then the last honorary mention I'm gonna make is Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic is already off to a pretty hot start this year, with already being revealed to be in the next Sonic movie. And obviously that doesn't come out until 2027, and that could potentially even be down the road his year if they were going to continue to do this every year. And I think that movie will take a lot of inspiration off the game of Sonic CD and also the movie Sonic OVA, where Metal Sonic is a huge part of that. Metal Sonic, I think, could have a year on him. He is super cool, but I don't think standalone, just regular old Metal Sonic could be an entire year wrapped around him. Having a voiceless character and just kind of having a carbon copy of Sonic would be a bit weird. I think if you, on the other hand, did something with Neo Metal Sonic, or introduced 3.0, or potentially even had him transform into Super Neo Metal Sonic, or even having the likes of Metal Overlord come back, I think if you wrapped all of those amazing forms into one kind of year, I think you could potentially make something really cool of that, and have him being a main villain and kind of pulling the strings like he does in Heroes or the IDW comics. Metal Sonic has a bunch of potential, and I definitely think that he could have a year on them, just not more than the top 5 that I chose today. But with all the honorary mentions being out of the way, let's talk about my top 5 on who I think deserves an entire year dedicated to them in the Sonic series. Number 5 is going to be Dr. Eggman. Dr. Eggman is another character that is off to a really great start in this year, with having an absolutely stellar performance with Jim Carrey as Dr. Eggman in Sonic Movie 3. And genuinely, I think that a lot of people kind of undervalue just how amazing of a villain he actually is at times. Eggman consistently has been the main villain in the Sonic series for the entirety of the series. Yeah, you have some villains that kind of take over, like the Deadly Six, Mephiles, Infinite, Dark Gaia, but Eggman still kind of has something to do with most of those characters. But Eggman's personality is consistently amazing, with being an absolutely comedy genius and being a general genius. I have never gotten sick of seeing Eggman, and Sonic Frontiers kind of gave him a whole new kind of way of looking at him, where he actually has emotions for Sage and really seeing her like a daughter, or he actually has a family and actually really cares for another person. Yes, he did create her, but the same thing goes, as he really does see her as a family. And I really like seeing this new side of Eggman, alongside keeping a lot of his traits from the older games. But I think that's kind of his biggest thing on why I think he stays around as a villain and we don't get sick of him. He's always creating new inventions, he's an absolute genius, he's genuinely really funny, and he'll even help Sonic at times if it really is in need, as I don't know if Sonic and friends were able to pull off Sonic Frontiers without him. But if you look at other villains that are kind of comparable with the likes of like Bowser does the same exact thing every single game. He steals the princess. Eggman does in some games definitely have some features where he's trying to do the same thing with building the likes of Eggman Land, or simply just trying to capture Sonic in some way. But I think genuinely the biggest thing that the Sonic series has over the Mario series is just the personality of all the characters. Bowser only ever actually has voice acting in two things, and that's the movie and Mario Sunshine. And if you've never heard Bowser's voice in Mario Sunshine, it's quite interesting. But the point is Bowser literally does the same exact thing in every single game, and while Eggman does have some of those traits, he has an amazing personality to really carry him through that. And Eggman genuinely does do a lot of different things, where he's switching it up with different machines, different ideas, and different motives. Eggman is definitely one of the best villains and definitely deserves to be recognized for that. And I think he 100% could have a year entirely dedicated to him, and I think he could carry the series similar to Shadow. He already is extremely popular, but also everybody loves him. I don't think I've ever met anyone or heard anyone actually saying that they dislike Eggman in a game, or any piece of media for that fact. And I genuinely think this would be a great choice by Sega if they decided to go this route. It would be kind of interesting to see them dedicate an entire year to a villain character, and it would be kind of interesting to see how that goes if they were to dedicate an entire game to him, as they can maybe do like a spin-off game like Mean Bean Machine, or potentially having something where you're able to build all of his mechs and kind of go out and fight the different Sonic characters. Like, I genuinely think that would be such a cool idea to build your own robot. You could end up building a version of Metal Sonic, Metal Knuckles, Metal Silver, Metal Shadow. You could do something like that, or build an entirely new robot to go fight off these people. And then having a gameplay where you're able to fight all the different characters and try to capture them would be really cool. I don't know how much they want to go that route, as that obviously is not anywhere near the traditional Sonic games that we know and love, but I think it would be a really cool thing. But definitely a game that would take a lot of time and development, especially if you're going to be all customizing and stuff like that with doing different mechs and robots. And that's another thing, they could potentially take his SA2 play style with the mechs, but I kind of hope that they won't do that if this was a reality. The mechs are fine, they just would need a really big revamp, and I think they'd need a lot better level design. As I personally think in gameplay for SA2, the mechs are the worst part. I think all of them are good before you get your pitchforks and torches out. I think that all the speed and all the treasure hunting stages and all the mech stages are good. The mech stages just definitely are worse than the other two. But moving into number 4 is Tails. Tails has a lot of opportunity for improvement in the Sonic series, as in recent years he has become quite a burden on Sonic. I know Sonic doesn't like to admit that in Sonic Frontiers, but I think we can all admit that he's been quite a burden to Sonic. I still think back to Sonic Forces, where he's absolutely helpless and crying for Sonic against Chaos 0. Keep in mind, in Sonic Adventure, Tails literally defeats Chaos 4 by himself if you play his story. You can make the argument that the Sonic and Knuckles are there, but I'm gonna take it as while you're playing Tails' story, you beat Chaos 4. But even so, he literally beats the Egg Walker entirely by himself. Surely the Egg Walker is a lot stronger than Chaos 0. And this isn't even Chaos 0, this is just a phantom copy of him, so I can't imagine he's anywhere nearly as strong as what the actual Chaos is. This is just such a downfall of Tails, and Tails genuinely deserves better. Tails is an amazing character. He's a genius, he's Sonic's best friend, and he's Sonic's sidekick. And he even mentions in Sonic Frontiers that he would like to kind of go on his own and do his own thing. So what better way to do that than announcing an entire year for Tails? A really cool thing that they could do potentially for Tails if they wanted to make him a playable character again is I think kind of combining his mech style and also the way that he was in Adventure, as where he's able to kind of fly and do his own thing on his feet, but also in Adventure 2 having the mech ability of being able to swap to that. A big example of that would actually end up being Sonic Frontiers, where at times you're able to fly in his mech when you feel like it. I think it'd be really cool to summon upon his mech or the tornado or any kind of the mechs that you build along the way, as you could one have a very similar style to what we're used to in Sonic games, but also going back to the more of the mech style with just having it more revamped. Like I said with Eggman, I think that they would have to completely redo the way the mechs are with different gameplay features and also different level design, but I think it could work really well. And you don't even really need Sonic in that game. You could have him make a few cameos and say cutscenes and kind of build on the lore of Tails, or potentially just have really cute cutscenes between the two. But I don't think you need Sonic in the games or anything like that by any means. And another really big opportunity would be doing a Tails show in the Sonic movies. Tails is definitely the one character in the entire series of the movies that kind of just gets little screen time. It doesn't really have that many powers. I've always thought it's kind of interesting that Sonic, Knuckles, and Shadow all have like a lightning abilities where they're able to power up and do different abilities. But Tails doesn't have that at all. Tails does have all of his gadgets and is pretty similar to how he is in the games, but I think it would be okay to kind of make him a little bit more of a fighter in the actual movies. I mean, he's a part of Team Sonic and he's fought really big things in the past. Again, my example with the Egg Walker. Tails is strong. I just don't know why Sega just continued to make him worse and worse about that. And Tails is genuinely a fan favorite character. He definitely could carry an entire year by himself, and I would say, just like Sonic and Shadow, most people probably know who Tails is, as he's been around since the beginning in Sonic 2. But moving into my next pick, at number 3, we have Knuckles the Echidna. My last video that I uploaded on the channel was me absolutely gushing about a bunch of different Knuckles, so go ahead and watch that if you haven't already. I spent a lot of time and research ranking every single Knuckles that I could possibly find. But if there's one character out of all the ones that we've talked about in the honorary mentions and Eggman and Tails being in the 5 and 4 slot, Knuckles is by far the one character that I think could easily carry a year, but also easily have a game dedicated to only him. I think that you could make a Knuckles game and not have another Sonic character within that game. That's how cool and just interesting of a character he is. He not only has the really cool abilities with having his treasure hunting, being the guardian of the Master Emerald, having some crazy fire abilities that he has in the movies, and just genuinely being an extremely strong character, but he also has some pretty damn crazy lore. There's obviously been a lot of different versions of his lore in the likes of the IDW comics, the Archie comics, and the games, but if we're talking about the games, his lore is still extremely interesting, as being the last guardian of the Master Emerald is just always been a question that has been unanswered for him. As in Sonic Adventure, he expresses why he doesn't understand why he was given that job. And I think it would be really cool if you kind of messed with some time travel stuff for Knuckles as well. I know a lot of people kind of get skeptical of that, especially with the likes how Sonic 06 ended up being, but I think if you had some time travel moments where he's able to kind of see into the past, whether it's through the Master Emerald or something like to call or something along those lines, I think it'd be really cool to kind of see Knuckles explore the past of his clan and family, and generally just get a lot more answers on why he is the Guardian and just where he came from, as Knuckles genuinely knows nothing except Angel Island. He's left alone for so long, and I think he deserves the answers, and I think it would be a really cool thing for us fans to explore. I think you could really make cool games out of that, you can make really cool comics out of it, and you could potentially even have a season 2 of the Knuckles show. I personally wasn't a huge fan of the Knuckles show, but I have said in the past that I really love movie Knuckles, and I think that he is the best version of Knuckles, and I think if you gave him more screen time and kind of maybe explored more of his side with Sonic and Tails, or potentially even doing something with Shadow inside of that, or maybe introducing a character like Rouge, opposed to having him travel around with the Wade Wimple doing bowling, I think it could be a really good show. The show has an amazing amount of potential, just like any movie has so far. It's just became such a Wade heavy show that really made me dislike it. But I also think that he could really work out in a game as well, whether it comes to treasure hunting or just simply running around like a traditional Sonic game of trying to get to the end of an act, or combining them both into kind of like a Frontier style game. I think if you put him in an open world setting and just kind of had where you can go through different acts and run through different levels as Knuckles that were more fit for him, with gliding and climbing and going through different levels like that, at moving at a fast pace, those would work extremely well for Knuckles. But I think it'd be cool to kind of still have that open world to kind of implement the treasure hunting in some way, with being able to find different skill points or potentially even trying to find Master Emerald shards in the hub world. I think if any character was to do it really well in an open world setting game, it would be Knuckles, as I still think that he worked in Frontiers. It's just his appearance is pretty damn short inside of DLC 3. But again, like the other characters, Knuckles is extremely popular, and I think is definitely a fan favorite amongst any character. And I think he could definitely do a really cool year dedicated to him. But with that being said, let's move into number 2 in Amy Rose. Sonic is about to be left with 0 friends because, as again, just like Tails and Knuckles, Amy expresses how she'd like to kind of go on her own and do her own adventures without relying on Sonic so much. And also kind of mentions being on a girls trip with the likes of Styx and Cream. I think this could be a really cool idea, and you could do a lot of different things with this, with different merch, comics, and even a game dedicated to Amy for this. Amy has went through quite the ringer when it comes to genuinely her writing as of recently, as they completely changed her personality as a whole, as she's not so much of this damsel in distress like she used to be. I didn't mind how Amy was in the past games of her kind of always chasing Sonic around, but I actually really like the way that she's written in modern times, with the way that she was seen in Frontiers, but also the way that she's being written in the movies. Amy never talks or anything like that inside of Sonic Movie 3 when she's actually revealed in the end credits, but you can see her saving Sonic, which is a pretty out of the ordinary thing for the likes of Amy Rose. Typically, it's the roles are reversed of Sonic saving Amy, but instead, Amy just absolutely obliterates a bunch of Metal Sonic copies. We obviously don't know how strong these so-called Metal Sonic copies are, whether they're from the future, the past, or the present, or what's going on with them, but I can't imagine it's easy just to take out a Metal Sonic. I mean, every piece of media that Metal Sonic's ever been in, he's been extremely strong, so I would imagine that they're going to write this Amy is very independent and very strong. And a lot of people are even saying that it might be the roles reversed of Sonic falling in love with Amy instead of Amy falling in love with Sonic. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but that's even more fuel to the flame on why I think a year could be dedicated to Amy. It might not be this year, and it might actually be 2027 when Sonic Movie 4 ends up coming out, but I think Amy Rose would be an amazing choice for that, considering I think she's going to be a huge part to play in that movie. So if she's already going to be a huge part to play in Sonic Movie 4, I think that she could be an even bigger part to play in her own game. I think it would be really cool to have the idea of having her Pico Pico Hammer abilities, her tarot card readings, like she has in Frontiers where she's able to fly and glide with all that stuff, but also just having a girls game. I know I'm going to kind of compare to the Mario series again with the likes of Princess Peach not having a very successful game, but I think that it could work for Amy, and I think it'd be really cool to kind of introduce some other female characters inside of that game, with having the likes of Cream, Styx. You could bring back Blaze, you could bring in Marine. You could finally put Tangle and Whisper in a game, and finally break out of just being a comic exclusive character. Yes, I know they're in Sonic vs. Speed Battle, but you get what I mean. Amy is a character that I genuinely have just always thought that deserves better, and I think doing that stuff could really work in her favor. I do think that it would probably be too early to say that this year would be her year, if anything, especially with the movie coming out in 2027. So I think if they waited a little bit to do that, I think that that would be the perfect time to do it, but I genuinely could see it happening. And I think it would be really cool to see a female character get that role of having an entire year dedicated to her. And I think Amy needs to be in that spot. But moving into my last character and who I think deserves a year to them the absolute most, and kind of a biased opinion, is Silver the Hedgehog. If you do not know, Silver the Hedgehog besides Sonic is my favorite character in the entire series, and genuinely I think he deserves better. Silver really seemed like he was going to be a main character again when he was officially announced, as he was kind of the next Hedgehog, and it really seemed like all the spotlight was on him during 06. And I think a lot of that came crashing to an end with the reaction to Sonic 06, and a lot of people just crapping on the game and associating Silver directly with that game. And I think this is a big reason on why he's just never gotten the main story kind of spotlight ever again. Yeah, he was in Sonic Forces, but even then he was still kind of limited. And he hasn't been playable in a mainline game since then. Silver, in my opinion, has the coolest abilities with having his psychokinetic powers, and also having a really cool backstory of having his ruined future and also his best friend Blaze at his side. And I think that's a really big thing that you could really focus on if you wanted to do an entire game dedicated to him, is having a style that's similar to Sonic 06 with just obviously being a lot more polished. You could take a great example of that from the likes of Chaos X's Project 06, and the way that Silver plays in that is absolutely incredible, and I'd love to see a game dedicated to kind of similar how he did that. But also having Blaze in there would be a really cool opportunity, as you could potentially explore Silver's past of kind of how the ruined future happened in his timeline, and have Blaze be a playable character and potentially some flashback scenes, as we already know that Blaze is no longer with him anymore. And you could potentially even make another Sonic Generations game down the road. I mean, the whole thing is that Shadow is kind of doing his own thing inside of the game, but one of the other rivals inside of that game is Silver. He could potentially be fighting his past, present, and future just like Shadow is inside of White Space before fighting off against Sonic. I really don't think that they should remaster Sonic Generations for a second time, as this would now be the third time that it would end up releasing, but I'm just saying that it could work. But I think if they were to do a Silver game, I think they should just genuinely do a game only dedicated to him, or at least have him be a main character again, very similar to how he was in 06, where you have a Sonic story, a Shadow story, and a Silver story. You could even throw Shadow out of there and throw, say, like a Knuckles story in there or something like that. But genuinely, he deserves to be a main character again, and he genuinely deserves justice. This character deserves so much better for how cool he actually is. An amazing design, amazing powers, an amazing story, and genuinely amazing friends with having the likes of Blaze with him. This character has so much potential. And I know a lot of people have already been talking about who deserves a year dedicated to them the most, and most people actually end up saying Silver, and I think will agree with me on this. I think it's too soon to really introduce him into the movies if they wanted to kind of focus on that, kind of similar to how they did with Shadow this year, as I think a big reason on why Shadow was picked for 2024 is because he was such a big role in the movie. Silver, on the other hand, could potentially be in Sonic Movie 5 or at the end of Sonic Movie 4 as a end credit scene, if that were to happen and the movies continue to keep doing well. But I think it's a little bit too soon to kind of introduce him, especially if we're kind of going towards more the Amy and the Metal Sonic route. But there has been rumors about them traveling to the past and future, and that could potentially tie him in somehow. Generally, I think that all of these characters deserve dedicated years to them, and I can't wait to see who Sega picks if they do decide to do another year dedicated to them. Ultimately, do I think that they're going to do another dedicated year right off the bat? No. I just think it's too soon to say, and I'm sure that they want to focus more on the next 3D Sonic game, and if you have an entire character dedicated to an entire year, I think it'd be hard for them to really focus on a Sonic 3D game unless that character was a big role in it or a main character in it. So you definitely could have a game where the next 3D Sonic game, say it's Sonic Frontiers 2 like the rumors are saying, and having Silver come along with him. I just think it's kind of unrealistic. But I think all of these characters would be great choices, and honestly, I would love to see them do another year dedicated to them. I love the idea of other characters getting the spotlight that aren't Sonic. I obviously love Sonic, and he's genuinely my hero in every way imaginable, and I absolutely love everything about him. I just like a lot of the other characters as well. Genuinely, I don't like the Sonic series just for Sonic. The series has a bunch of amazing characters and they all deserve spotlights. But that's also the problem, is there are so many characters, so it's hard to fit them all into a piece of media. But with that being said, guys, let me know in the comments below on who you would like to see have a dedicated year to them, even if it doesn't make sense. Hey, if you want to see the Jet the Hawk, Mighty the Armadillo, Ray the Flying Squirrel, or even a year of the Donpa, hey, I'd like to hear it in the comments, let me know. But with that being said, guys, I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.